Hello and welcome to this new video in the SQL section. In this video, we will learn about aggregate functions. Let's get started. I already have a new query window, so I will target a new table this time. Until now, we have been using only dim product. So now I'll change this and use a table called as fact internet sales. This is basically nothing but a transaction table. So you will see more records in this. So there are about 60,000 odd rows into this. If you scroll on the right hand side, you will see a lot of numeric columns or metrics like unit price, cost, total cost, sales amount, etc. And we are going to use them. So let's narrow down only to sales amount. So when you will run, obviously, you will only see the sales amount column. Now what I want to do is I want to sum up all these values and see how much is the total sales, overall sales in this table. So all you will do is use an aggregate function called as sum. And it's almost the same across any tool that you used it in, like in Excel or any other thing. So the task of sum is to just sum up the values. Execute this. What you will get is a combined aggregated value, which is this one. Now, a single value or a combined single value is also called as a scalar value. Keep that in mind. Scalar and single mean the same. In the similar way, I will just copy paste these 3 more times. If you want average, you will write AVG, not average. It stands for average itself, but the function name is AVG. So you will get the average, and average is nothing but sum divided by count. We'll come to the count also. Then I have another function called as min. If I execute this, I'll get the smallest number. If I want max, I'll get the largest number. This way. So these are some simple functions to start with. Now a few more things. If you notice, we have got a new font color which is pink. It indicates that it is a built-in function of T-SQL. So that is an indication that it is a function. And this is a keyword. This is not a function. So there is difference between a keyword and function. Both ultimately are part of the SQL library, but there is bifurcation. Like this is a keyword and this is a pure function. This is not a function. Select is not a function. A function is nothing but one which can return you something in the end. And it can take one or more inputs. At times, a function cannot have any input also. I'll come to that later on to show you such functions. Now, first thing, if you notice, when we were writing select sales amount from fact internet sales, I was getting the header. But here I'm not getting the header. So what happens is, this is the behavior that you have to understand in SQL. That when you use functions, your header will go off and it will show this way, no column name. And that doesn't look nice because you would be reusing these queries and you would want to know. Now, if you just give this output to someone else, you'll not be able to understand what exactly that number is. Instead, if there was a header on top of that, that would have been so nice for someone to relate it. So how do you do this? All you need to do is to rename this. How do you rename? You give a space after this function. And here you can say as keyword and use any unique name. Let's say I call this as total sales. So this is called as a renaming process. So we are renaming this out column or the output what we have got as total sales. Now if you select and run, you can clearly see it has renamed it. There are a few renaming rules that you have to remember. This is the first convention, but as is optional, as is not compulsory. You can remove this and just give a space, yet it will work fine. One other thing. If you want to give a space in between, that is not allowed. If you will run this, you will get error. But at times, people do still want to continue with space. So the trick to it is, you will enclose this in square brackets. And which is then fine. However, I would rather say avoid this. You should not give space because every time you call this in your subsequent queries, you will have to again enclose in square brackets. So one thing I want to make clear today is, if you have anything like table, column or other things that we are going to learn, when you rename them, you should not have spaces in between, because when you call them in your queries, you will have to always surround them in square brackets. The best thing is that if you have multiple words and that was your only intention why you wanted to separate them, use underscore. That is best. You don't need square brackets for that because it combines 2 words together. So use underscore between 2 words. That is the best practice that you can follow, and you will see this. All right. So that is about renaming the things. Now, you can also sometimes you would want to do multiple aggregation in a single query. Yes, that is also possible. So you can say comma, and I'll split this and say average of sales amount as average sales. And you can again say comma, min sales, max sales. Now have a look how this output looks like. So it will give you two different columns. Why? Because comma means you are going to define a new column, a new calculation, or referring to a new column, whatever. So when you do select, I told you there are many variations, and this is just we have got started with. There are many functions we are going to learn and processes or different things that will come along. So when I want to just add one more calculation or column in a select, I just say comma and keep continuing. There is no restriction, so I can go. So this is one thing now. Next is the time to understand about count. Now we kept this separately so that you understand this. There are multiple scenarios in this. So you say select count of, if you want to know how many rows are there in a table, then for example, you say dim product. You just say select count star from dim product. Execute this. So what you get is when you say select star, you get all the rows. But if you want the count of the table, this is how you write 60 count of star from any table name. So what it does is it gives you the total number of rows in the table. Now, at times you would have seen, or you might see something like count of 1. Now what is this going to return you? Same thing. If you run both, you see there is no change in the output. It's only that the way how you write it is different. Basically, there are a lot of things that you would get to read about this when you search online as to what is difference between count star and count 1. And at times you might see the explanations are contrary. So even, that's what I have tried to always honestly find out. Since the result is same, just count 1, what does it mean? Actually, here instead of 1, you could write anything. You could even write 1000, and it is not going to return you 1000. It will still return you the same number of rows. So ideally, based on what I have searched a lot of things on this one, what I've seen is that maybe at times people say, okay, it is assigning that value what you're writing inside the count, 1000 or whatever, to every single row in a table, and then counting that. So obviously it will give you the count of rows only. So whether you use count star or count of 1 or count of any number, it is going to ultimately return the same. At times people also say count star is not performant. They think that it might scan the entire table, and count of any number is performant. Okay, so that is something which is not really concretely clear, but mostly you will end up seeing count star only. Yes, but I can tell you one thing for sure, that since these tables are quite small, and we saw that the data was executed, the query was executed just within a fraction of a second. When you run count star on such a table which has millions of rows, like 5 million, 10 million, and so onward, obviously it will take longer time to return the count because it has to count those many rows. So that is not performant, because just think in a live environment you are working on a record set of a table which has like 20 million rows, and that is quite practical, not to exaggerate. Even like 5, 10 million, 12 million, also very common. And it can take like not just seconds, it can take up to minutes also, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It depends on the how the server is capable of in terms of infrastructure. We'll learn about this later. So what is the solution there? And you cannot wait to get the count of a table for 10-15 minutes, just a simple count. So there are some smart substitutes I will teach you in the future when we will go ahead. But for now, that's it on this debate. And one more thing, if you write count of a column, for example, I say list price, and if you run this, what will happen over here? Now here you see the difference. If you run select star from dim product and you say list price column, you see that there are 606 rows. Have a look at that. But if you see first few rows, about like 200 odd rows, 211 rows to be precise, are having something called as null. Now this is a a topic that has to be discussed in detail, but I'll tell you in short for right now, and we'll see this in later section. Null means absence of a value. So the corresponding row for that product, it doesn't have any price. The value is just absent. Just keep that one thing in mind right now. Null is not equal to space or a blank. It is different, and I'll prove it to you. Now what happens is, when there are 606 rows, so when you will run this count of a column, you will get only those rows which are having some value. It will exclude the rows which are having null as a, null means absence of a value. We cannot also call null as a value, so which doesn't have any value, and it is not equal to space or blank. So there are 606 rows. If you subtract that 211, you get 395. So keep in mind, count star is different as compared to count of a column. So count of a column gives you all the rows less or except the null. And if you wanted to count the null columns, what would you do? So you can just say count of 1, okay, where list price is not null. Now this is another filter that we will learn. So this is how you will get not null, but we wanted only nulls. So I'll keep both the things and then you will understand. So I'll just say is null. So you see 211 rows have null values. And obviously if you want to target to a specific column, you can be more specific. Okay. Now you cannot do this way, because why? Count of any column will not return you any null rows. So you cannot do this, sorry. You just keep it this way to get the null count. Okay. Now what is this? When you want to check how many rows are null, you will not use equal to. You will rather use a special keyword called as is, and then use the keyword called null. Now there are some keywords, logical keywords, they appear in another font color which is gray. You would have seen this with or and. So is the case with is null, is not null. So is null means if it is null, then the condition is true, and not will invert the condition. Not is an operator which changes true to false and vice versa. So this will give you all those rows where it is not null, alright, and this will give you where it is null. Keep that in mind. We will see this in future. So for example, if you wanted to just extend further, if you want to filter all the rows which are null, how would you do? You say select star from dim product where list price is null. Now if you see, have a look at that, and if you just invert this condition by saying is not null, what will you get? You will get all those rows where the list price has some value. It is not null. So null, simply put, for now, keep in mind, it is absence of a value. At a proper time, I will explain you what that means when we will see joins. Alright. So that's it on this basic set of aggregate functions, and we are going to use them in the next section. See you. Thank you.